folks, and welcome to Film Optimists, where we talk about all things film with a healthy dose of optimism. I'm your co-host, Seth Boyd.
I am Megan Tierney.
And we're coming back after a bit of a delay because the pandemic is still going. In case in point, I got COVID, so be careful out there, folks. So Megan,
That's okay.
Yes, I'm okay now, and hopefully by the time this airs, I will not have COVID and we'll be enjoying public life again. But we'll see.
Thanks to vaccines.
Yes.
I'm happy you're feeling good, Seth.
Yes, absolutely. It was certainly through the worst of it. So that Megan, this is actually the first time we've been able to do this in a little bit. We've been able to connect, and we talked about one of my favorite movies by one of my favorite directors, and someone who I think you're definitely familiar with, but maybe hadn't seen a full film from. I think just being a film person, you definitely, I imagine, had some expectations. So, spoil it further, we watched Mulholland Drive by David Lynch.
Yes,
and I am so excited to hear what your thoughts, I would love to know what you thought of it in general, but also what you kind of expected a Lynch movie to be, and how this fulfilled that or didn't.
Well, you described my relationship to it perfectly, Seth. You got that right on, because I think like it's one of those directors and like filmic styles that we're gonna talk heavily about, I'm sure, that if you're any kind of film kid, any kind of in a film class, I think it's going to be discussed a little bit. And it certainly was for me in my even non-film minor. They still got in some Lynchisms in there. We actually funnily enough, watched Twin Peaks.
Oh, really? Okay, fantastic.
Yeah, so a couple episodes of Twin Peaks. Yeah, very similar style, and it was very striking and has a distinct tone and feel that I did pick up on, and is very, very like steady throughout this movie, I think. But basically that was my little take going into it. I am pretty sure that Mulholland Drive is one of Lynch's like most popular movies, and I was wondering for you, like especially as more of a fan than I am, an expert than I am, how it is a representation of his filmic genre as a whole.
Sure, absolutely. I am certainly a fanboy here, so I can't deny that.
Love that.
I love all Lynch movies. I've already come out with my confession of even loving Lynch's Dune. So take everything I say with a grain of salt there, folks. But
I remember
for as great as everything he has done, my big three for Lynch are Mulholland Drive, Twin Peaks as a whole, which is including the third newer season and the movie, and Blue Velvet. And for films, Blue Velvet and Mulholland Drive are really neck and neck. They're both very, very Lynch. I think they're both important to understand on a grander scale who Lynch is. And Mulholland Drive kind of kicked off a new era of Lynch, which arguably somewhat short-lived, because he just did Inland Empire after that, and then quite a break between doing Twin Peaks season 3, but had a new, there's some old faces in Mulholland Drive that we're going to get into, but there's kind of like Naomi Watts became like a new muse who's worked with again since then. And Blue Velvet has Kyle MacLachlan and Laura Dern, people who's worked with quite a bit, who are, two of the most Lynchian actors who are parts of his regular crew. And it's small town America. And it's some opposing things, some similar things, and everything that happens in Blue Velvet actually happens. Everything in Mulholland Drive is very much up for debate as to what actually happened. We'll get into that in a moment. But both are still completely surreal and a very singular vision. And that I think that's one of the things I really like about David Lynch is he's a true auteur in that he writes, he directs, he does the sound design, he does production design. In all his movies, he's literally, he's building props, he's making sets, he's heavily involved in the editing. He usually picks his cast based off just the headshot and the conversation. There's not actually reading lines. So a very, and he is a artist in the most true sense of he literally, was a painter. He went to art school as a painter, ended up becoming a filmmaker through that. And he still paints very successfully and very prolifically. So he has a very different, very little artist approach to films that you just aren't going to get from other people because they didn't go to art school to make art films, to make art in general. They, someone who's gone to AFI went to a very different thing than he did in the 70s.
Wow. He's every film student's dream. That sounds
He really
like
is. Yeah.
like what we wanted, Seth, what me and you wanted in our
exactly.
early days.
We were definitely hoping to just get complete of control, you know, and
painting
exactly
sets and stuff
painting
like,
sets, doing everything. And there's famously a scene in Eraserhead of a man is walking up to a room, and then he enters the room, and walking up to and then entering the room were shot 2 years apart because he ran out of money. So that's also the other side of this coin of the art student, struggling artist.
I see.
Trying to make
he was Eraserhead, right?
Yeah, Eraserhead is his first film.
Wow.
Yeah,
okay.
That was his very first film, and kind of burst onto the scene with that. But yeah, go to your comment about Mulholland Drive being one of his most famous and I think most applauded, although it certainly has its critics. Eraserhead, was huge critically and is a very, very strange. And I also love it, but as a even stranger movie than this, arguably not. But he did have some, I don't want to say fully career misses, but definitely movies that I love, but movies that were not as acclaimed. Blue Velvet is definitely a big critical hit. Lost Highway, I really like. Not everyone does. Same with Wild at Heart, and then he did a Disney movie. He did Straight Story, which is I think it's rated G, maybe PG, but it's about a man visiting his brother on a tractor. It's actually great, and it doesn't seem like it'd be a Lynch movie, but it really is. Check that out as well. And then he came back in really true form of everything you expect and hope a Lynch movie to be, of a complete mindfuck with Mulholland Drive.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's the quick history.
That's a good history. Varied history.
He's definitely someone, once you get into, you really get into, at least in that experience. You don't I don't know how a lot of people who like shoehorn, or rather not shoehorn, who cherry pick Lynch. There's not people who only like Twin Peaks or something. You kind of want more the more you get.
I think that's something I came into it knowing or feeling as well, is that he has a very distinct tone, style, auteurism, like you said, and that reigns. That Disney one is throwing me for a loop, but I think that reigns true for for what I expected in Mulholland Drive. What it kind of like, what I thought of the movie in general is like, okay, I kind of see it, and from what I've heard of it all kind of rings true that this is a guy who has a very distinct eye, at least. Yes, for sure what I can say.
Certainly.
Yeah.
So, with that that being said, so what is your first impressions? I don't know how much you knew about this, but it's there's a lot to know about this movie after having seen it. This is a movie that sends people to watch it again, to look up the theories, etc. So what was your first thoughts?
It felt very fun to watch, like, such a distinct movie, I guess. I think it was very you're expecting, I think so. It's available on Prime right now. Actually, sorry, I rented it via Prime, and I think the description of it says something like thriller. What's this thriller gonna turn into, or something like that. So you're kind of expecting, you're given just this very cookie cutter box of filmic descriptions that this movie will just never fit into, obviously. I don't think so. It is a bit of a wild ride. I think that in a bit of prep for this episode, I kind of got to thinking about avant-gardism, which I know that he's like, that's a big buzzword for Lynch, and I do think that the film follows it and pays very close homage to it very nicely. And I think that it's actually kind of nice too. Like, avant-gardism is a very extremely old filmic technique that feels very modernized in this version, and is a good like modern representation of it in Hollywood, in the city where it all happens, kind of thing. So you get this really weird, twisted, dreamlike version of everything going on, and that's been really fun. I think, especially in this age where we're getting kind of these I was like trying to compare to something, I thought of La La Land, and you think of something like La La Land, which is in complete like juxtaposition of what this is doing, basically. And also, like, I think my rec is going to talk a little bit is a bit of a juxtaposition too. to it. It's not La La Land, guys, but promise you just like can't compare the two. But
right.
That's to say that like there's all these like love letters to Hollywood basically, and this is just like this like fucked up freak show going on. Is what I got from it. But yeah, so Seth, like what even is this movie about?
Fair enough. Great question, Megan. So so the general gist of this movie is that we actually don't begin on Mulholland Drive. We begin with the jitterbug contest.
That's right.
I don't have it with me, but the original DVD of this movie, which I still have a copy of, comes with a list of I think 12 things that David Lynch wrote to check and to understand it. And it's things like note the coffee table, note the lamp, so there actually is like there's a theory that we're going to get into in a moment, and then there's a lot more like legwork that can be done that I frankly haven't fully put into. But every time I watched it, I do think like, oh, okay, I get that now, because it is true surrealism, and it is brain association, it's dream logic. So we begin actually with a jitterbug contest, but shortly we get back to the title Mulholland Drive, and there is a limo driving Mulholland Drive. It stops abruptly. There's a beautiful woman in the back who says, "What are you doing? We don't stop here." And then a gun is pulled on her. Simultaneously, there's some kids joyriding. And we've seen, quick shots of these kids a couple times and cut back to the limo, etc. And then as the woman is about to be shot by presumably people who work for her, there's a collision with that joyriding car, crashes into them, and this woman is the only survivor who now has amnesia and doesn't know her name and really what was going on. She wanders into a house, and simultaneously our main lead here, and I should say, sorry, the woman is played by Laura Herring. And then we cut to the next day. Naomi Watts is just complete gee whiz kid, as she put it, reading the screenplay. This character belongs on a cigarette box in 1944. The most optimistic, I can't believe I made it to Hollywood, I'm going to be a star person arrives in the airport. They're going to be taking over their aunt's apartment, who's out of town. And she basically ends up in the same space that this woman snuck into with amnesia. And without getting too many of the details, it becomes clear that this woman doesn't know who she is. And in a very classic film canon, they just get excited about, oh, we're in the middle of a mystery, let's solve it. It turns into a noir thing of Betty trying to help her figure out who she is. I don't want to get too bogged down in the details. I mean, that's kind of the gist of it, but there's a lot of surreal things that happen. We also have Justin Theroux is great in this, and he's a director who's being told, seems like by the mob, that he has to cast a particular woman. He doesn't want to do it. And the main twist thing that happens here is maybe 3/4 of the way through the movie, everything changes. Everything really abruptly changes. We have a very famous scene at Club Silencio. Things become much more surreal. We're going to talk about this scene later, I think. And afterwards, these women don't seem to be the same people. They're going by different names. They have different personalities. And it's directed much more aggressively, much more avant-garde. It's getting increasingly strange. And there's a lot of anger between these two women. They're ex-lovers. Now, Justin Theroux, who was the director, who Naomi Watts nearly got cast by, is now married to Laura Herring's character, who's we're calling Rita now, I think, or was it Camilla? Everyone's name is changed. And spoiler warning, trigger warning, this movie ends in Naomi Watts's new character taking her own life. And so the main theory, Megan, you might have caught on with, is that the last 30-ish minutes of the movie, the last third, is what actually happened. And the first portion of the movie, exactly. I figured you get that. And the first portion is her kind of fever dream hallucination of this dream world where she's still with her beautiful girlfriend, and she actually is a successful actress, and through her own kindness misses the great audition because she's being a good friend. But this fever dream still kind of cracks down, and basically she puts out a hit on her ex, and she's overwhelmed with guilt. So Naomi Watts' character, puts a hit on Laura Herrings, and it goes through, and then she kind of is overwhelmed with guilt and kills herself. So
Yep.
for anyone who didn't know that's what the movie's about, that's what happens. So,
literally.
And I should say, this is, I think, as we're just talking it through, I think you're seeing how it's that movie made. I think anyone who's seen it before and heard this theory is pretty quick to adapt to it. It is basically canon what the movie's about, although it is a deeply surreal movie. It has a lot of scenes that seem completely disconnected, that are
right.
I will say, I think maybe the strangest, going back to our last episode talking about audience, and when we're talking about Nope, maybe the strangest experiences I've ever had in a movie theater is seeing a David Lynch movie in a movie theater. And I saw Anne and I saw Mulholland Drive at Pacific Film Archive, like a revival.
Wow.
And there were many times where people were laughing, where others were screaming in terror. And I was not always with the majority of the people. And David Lynch is not unaware that he's funny. He is funny. And there's a lot of things that are very intentionally, like Naomi Watts being so, optimistic in a 50s Leave It to Beaver type of thing is funny. Yes. And especially with what happens later. And a lot of the violence is funny. And that's not an accident. And I think that's where some people might get confused watching something, especially something like Twin Peaks, which is very, very intentionally over the top. It's largely a parody of soap operas, and I think that's something we've lost actually in talking about it. So but it's very extreme emotions back to back. They're opposing.
I agree with you. I was actually really struck by how many times I was laughing, audibly laughing aloud, and good little, very direct jokes. Not even, and especially too, I think the first two acts basically are very parody-like. I was wondering, I mean, I think it is an obvious parody of Hollywoodisms and just that kind of lore in general. And Naomi Watts' character, I assume, is supposed to embody that, and she certainly does. She was really strikingly fantastic in the movie, because the change is so stark. It was pretty
we should know one of the major changes that happens before the real reveal happens is she goes to her audition, and we don't have any reason to think she's going to be good in this audition. And she's auditioning for a really dumb movie about daughter is sleeping with her father's best friend or something like that.
Yes.
And we see her auditioning and kind of laughing at it, but then once the actual audition happens with the man, Naomi Watts is a completely different person, and she's actually doing this. She's very seductive. She's very in control. And there's a great book on David Lynch by Dennis Lim called Man from Another Place. He notes that this scene was the first time audiences are aware that Naomi Watts can act, really, because this was kind of in the movie, because she was an Australian actress who hadn't really done much. And what a shock this was for who is this person? Oh my God, she's really good, because she's just been a very one-dimensional character up to that point, and it's very jarring. And she goes back to being, oh, how'd I do? Being very excited. Yeah,
a lot of duality lives in it through at least the beginning dream sections, and until it very much becomes the latter turn, which is really cool. And again, Naomi, I was really impressed with Naomi Watts' character.
Yeah, there's awesome. Full-on slapstick scenes. There's one of the funniest, crime gone wrong. A guy just tries to shoot somebody and take a phone book with important numbers, and ends up killing two other people and burning down a building, and it's hilarious. And I love it. It's a very unexpected thing to happen. But that's some real Coen Brothers shit.
Yeah, it really was. I think that there's a lot of tones that get danced around in here really nicely. It all kind of blends. I think that has to do with the dreamlike aspect of it all, I assume. And I had never, in a long time, I feel like dream sequences are really hard to do. I was trying to, and it's just been done. It's kind of hard to make it sort of refreshing. I think it's really funny that people don't like to talk about dreams, because I love talking about dreams. I think it's so interesting. And I think people don't like it because of how abstract it is, or I've heard the argument that well, who cares? It didn't happen. But I think that which is just funny, anecdote, side note.
I think everyone's been shaken by a dream.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So it did something to you that happened. So I'm certainly with you, Megan.
Yeah, so it's like I think that this film really does a good job of making you care, because it's not so wishy-washy that you're like you think it's all a dream, or like there's so many different pieces where they're at least connecting together that really drags you along nicely for the ride, and it's not just all up in the air. I thought that was something that struck me that he did really well.
I agree. I find it always engaging. Did the more intentionally frightening or dramatic scenes also work for you, Megan?
They did. That was a good thing to note too, is that it's a lot of also classic like horror elements of tons of POV shots, which is a dreamlike sequence as well too. But now that's all horror does, or like that's like what a big horror trope that gets used with that.
That's
so like that, and then jump sequences peppered in there, not a ton, but it helps too.
One of the strangest jump sequences, the Winkies sequence, the diner.
That's right.
Yeah.
Just unexpected, I guess.
Yeah.
Kind of like a dream. So I think it, all in all, just very effective at dreamlike scape, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I presume that you liked it.
I did. Yeah. Okay. It really like. It certainly throws you back. Like it reminds you, it also was extremely filmic. Like I thought it was very specifically cinematic, which is nice. And it threw me back to like why film classes had required me to watch Twin Peaks, or just like how to match cut everything and do stuff like that. So that was really fun. Really cool. Fun.
Did you watch the pilot of Twin Peaks in class?
We watched about the pilot, maybe like up to 2 episodes or so.
Okay.
And that was about it.
That's a pretty good taste of Lynch. Yeah.
So, yeah.
And I think that's the thing that I like there's dream sequences in here, but there's also often overtly supernatural things in Lynch movies that are not easily explained away, that are very dreamlike, that are very nightmare-like rather, that have a logic to them that is not initially clear. Like there are rules to these things,
Sure.
And and certainly in Twin Peaks, which has actual demons in it, like that's a major plot points, spoiling a show from 1990. But that's like, there's stuff like that in here, but it's not, I think because it does rely on the dream logic, it is much more frightening to me than, oh, here's the reason for the curse, and now we've listed the curse, or anything like that, which I still love too.
Right. It's like explicitly not a horror movie or supernatural horror in that way, which is cool. Like it's just and it was like, it's kind of set up as a whodunit. It's not that either. It's like it exists in between a lot of genres, I think.
Absolutely. I mean, it's certainly singular, and I enjoy that, because for me, each moment works as its moment. It didn't. Nothing felt like he was trying to do something that didn't work. And again, this is someone who's very into. I fully understand someone who just wants to watch a straightforward movie being really pissed off about this, and I know somebody who likes Lynch movies and hates Mulholland Drive, and that's the very strange take to me.
Wow. Yeah.
Literally one person, but because this
pretty
is
unpopular
among their best. Exactly, this is widely considered among the best, and film critic Roger Ebert famously had kind of, not exactly few, but didn't like a lot of Lynch movies, and loved Mulholland Drive. Ebert and Ebert and his former partner gave Lost Highway 2 thumbs down, and David Lynch put on the poster, "That's 2 reasons to see it," and didn't just say this, literally put it on the poster. So it was a bit of a bitter, public, we don't get along thing. And
interesting.
And Roger Ebert loved Mulholland Drive, so this is like the best movie he's made since, I think, Eraserhead, or maybe Elephant Man. So very acclaimed.
Nice. I mean, I can see how it's up your alley, Seth. I was wondering too, like, how do you feel about visually the movie? I think I loved that aspect of it too.
Oh yeah, it's very. I was going to ask you about that, because I think we don't need to say what movie it is, but there's a movie that I thought you would like that was too maximalist for you, and
can you remind me of it? I don't.
Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Oh, okay. it was like almost too maximalist. I agree.
Fair enough. Which I get, because if any movie is going to be too much, it's that movie. But
Sure.
this movie is not necessarily throwing. It's not as intentionally fun and fast paced as that, but there's a lot going on. There's a lot of visual stimuli, and there's a lot of fascinating camera angles and editing techniques, and the sound design I think is really, really important in this, because
very much
he's heavily involved in that. And like, we're going back to like we'll describe the sequence a little bit, because it's one of those sequences that haunts me, and definitely I watched it with people who laugh at it, and I understand it still really scares me, which is these characters almost never come back. But two guys meet at a diner, and one guy's telling him, like, I need you to meet me here because I had a dream about sitting in this booth at this diner, and it was happening, and what it is not really clear. It's like, and then he basically just describes this very strange scenario, and his friend says, all right, well, let's go check it out. And then immediately as he gets up, realizes he's set into place exactly what his friend was just describing, where he goes to pay, and then his friend is looking over him just like he was in his dream. It just becomes a very strange, haunting, like nothing threatening is actually happening, but this was exactly what he was talking about. And this culminates in a jump scare, which I think is extra effective because it isn't a thing jumping out of it. It's a thing very kind of swiftly but gracefully sliding out in front of the camera. And
best way to describe it.
Right. And the man, and this is I've heard it called different things, the caveman, the Neanderthal, the garbage man, a few different things. But this is a person with a particular filthy look who does not seem to be natural. What are they doing here? And it is frightening. But the man who's describing this dream almost has a heart attack. But the sound design in that scene is what I think makes it so bizarre and really sticks with me, because you do kind of get this sense of a supernatural, strange thing happening about him having a physical reaction to it. And even though it's shot great, the cinematography is fantastic, the sound design is really, I think, key to that scene. And that's the case for a lot of Lynch movies and a lot of Lynch scenes. And that's why he's credited as the sound designer on his movies.
Well, he wants that credit.
Exactly. I mean, he does.
I mean, even the editing.
People still talk about, he has not revealed how he's made some of the sounds for Erase Your Head. Particularly the baby talking. There's theories that he's not confirmed.
He likes that air of mystery.
He does, yeah.
Nice. I mean, I agree. Like, even the sound or the editing techniques, I was gonna say, almost made it. I was on the edge of my seat thinking this may be a pseudo sci-fi thing going on or something.
That's fair. Yeah.
Because it was so, I mean, you're dragged along this bizarre journey, but there were very specific like cuts that were unnatural, and it kind of dated it a little bit, unfortunately, but not bad. Like, I thought it was an interesting element nonetheless. Like, I don't really care that it looked a little, maybe
there's some digital camera
2000
things that look like this is a digital camera in 2000.
Exactly.
Absolutely, but still doing something that no one else would do with a camera.
That's it. Yeah, that's what it was, and very like stylized in that regard. So that's not a fault of it at all. But it and it added to it. Like, I was like, ooh, maybe this is a that almost added a supernatural element to it as well. Yeah. But thankfully, it wasn't overdone. In fact, it was extremely minimal. So that worked personally for me. Yeah, but going back to also the just look of it all, I was really struck by, and I'm wondering if Lynch, I just feel like it was such a nice homage, well, not necessarily nice, I would say, but like an homage nonetheless to Hollywood in general. And I think he captured just things very well. I don't know if like, I was trying to use the word like texture in film. Sure. I don't know if that's quite the right word I'm trying to go for or theme here, but it's like, but like there's just a lot of visual texture that I see going on in this movie that looks so amazing. It really is like, I always like to say like purely filmic, like it's a great way to capture everyday life. And it's not these big grandiose sets or mixed in with CGI or anything like that. It's just like, it is what it is, but it's very set up in a specific way, like a play almost. And that was something that really struck me about this movie. And I think of Twin Peaks as well.
Yeah, the mise en scène, basically.
That's it.
Yeah,
That's it.
Absolutely. And he is someone who certainly loves old movies, particularly one of his favorite movies is Sunset Boulevard. So kind of a similar theme of a famous road in Hollywood be the title for a movie that not exclusively but largely skewers Hollywood, because like it's such a surreal thing that you don't really leave that thinking like, wow, he really burned Hollywood. But that's also largely plot wise what is happening. There's a lot about it, and I love that aspect too, because you do have this man's, it seems like the mob is coming after this guy. Justin Theroux's character. I always love Justin Theroux. I'm very happy he's got this part. But it's so much more surreal because they cut off all his money. They do things that you think, how does the mob actually do that? And then he has to go meet the cowboy at the top of the ranch at midnight to solve this, and he's speaking kind of in riddles, and it's much stranger than just because of money reasons you have to do this. It's not just it's much creepier, it's much stranger, and you have the mob, which, by the way, one of those mafioso guys is played by Angelo Badalamenti, the guy who spits out the espresso, and that's the composer Lynch has used since Blue Velvet, who did the soundtrack for this and for Twin Peaks. And so that's, and like the guy who is the cowboy is a producer he's worked with before. So that's kind of what I mean too, about Lynch has his camp, which is now thankfully Naomi Watts and folks like that, but is also sometimes just a background person who's a behind the scenes guy who will have a cameo like that.
That's nice.
But like that's a very strange, creepy thing that is much more disturbing. That is like this Kafka version of working in Hollywood.
Ooh, that's a great word.
Right. But then that's still, though, Adam is hardly the main character of this movie. And so I kind of like that. And Inland Empire is partially, I should say largely about Hollywood as well, but it's more like that's where it takes place and it gets into something much stranger. So I like that these are his Hollywood movies. This is definitely someone who's been screwed by Hollywood before, famously with Dune. And Mulholland Drive was actually meant to be a TV show for ABC. And then it got the rug pulled out from under it because they were terrified as what they had seen, and he hadn't been able to edit much yet. So actually most of the first hour and a half or so of the movie was a pilot, in that he was an extended pilot, and then the rest was shot later. And
that's really funny. That's kind of like it reminds me of Twilight Zone in that sense, or something too, like where Disney could grab their hands on, or ABC at the time, and try to make it a little more palatable, I guess, for audiences. And I'm certainly glad that it's in this format rather than, because I think I could totally see like a series right now being like that, and but being a little more cookie cutter or straightforward or something like that.
Because and he really liked the idea of this not having an ending. Like he wanted to begin with a woman, in this car and not knowing who she was, and he had no intention of answering that question anytime soon. He's like, maybe season 5, season 6, the finale, we'll find out who Rita really is. Same with Twin Peaks, is he never wanted to reveal who killed Laura Palmer, and he was forced to. So that's another. There's certainly like an interpretation of this movie is that he is much more bitter when he makes the second half of it, because it certainly is not what was originally going to be. But it's also great.
That's interesting.
And he avoids such questions.
I like the air of mystery around it too. I think with a movie like this, you really have to be. So I think that's a good old Hollywood lesson to kind of just keep your cards to your heart a little bit about. If you have a enigmatic thing like this, let it be. I think we like to have things tied in a bow as of late, and this is
that's very true.
A really nice way to not do that.
And on that note, we're gonna have to do a Christopher Nolan episode eventually, because he keeps coming up on the podcast, and I do like Christopher Nolan, but he is surprisingly open of what his movies are about, to a point that you wouldn't expect. He's thoroughly gone into detail to how Inception is about movies, and that's not nearly as complicated as what Mulholland Drive is really about, but he's potentially, one could argue, especially in contrast with Lynch, who he's a big fan of, is open to a fault in terms of now the art is about something. And Lynch is very skeptical of that, of giving it a name. And once you have, this is what it's about, that's all that it's about. And I respect that.
Yeah, for sure.
So beyond, the theories as to what this movie's about plot wise, there's still plenty to digest as to what it's about thematically. And this does, with the doubles that we have, everybody kind of being a doppelganger of their self, and with the Club Silencio sequence, which is really where the plot changes. It's the gear shift scene. And this is a scene where out of nowhere, Rita just wakes up saying Silencio, just seems to be chanting and shaking, almost like she's having a seizure. And this is, we have to go somewhere now. And they go to this nightclub, which is the most Lynch set. And a man is basically just telling everybody, this is a tape. Keeps saying, no hay banda. Like there is no band, yet we hear a band. Everyone is speaking perfectly in time when they're supposed to, but it's all a recording. And even though this keeps happening and keeps getting increasingly emotional with a woman coming out and singing the beautiful version of a Ray Orbison song, and then collapsing, and the music keeps going, it keeps getting stranger and stranger. And it's a very emotional sequence that actually works very well for me. But this kind of ties into a very common theory too, like Lynch is telling us we want to be lied to. We like movies. We like mysteries. We like the lies. And that's fine. And so he's giving us the lies in a different context than we're used to. And this is also, I think, very much in line with Vertigo and with Rear Window from Hitchcock as well. Like we want the mystery. We want it. And that's a theory. There's obviously the fear of identity in general, losing identity, particularly in Hollywood. The corruption of the city. There's plenty of theories that are worth tapping into that go well beyond what actually happened plot wise. And even with the plot being exposed, there's a lot of details like, well, what's with the cowboy? What's with the blue box exactly? What does this particular thing mean? So I think that's why I keep coming back to this movie. It's a very rich mind that continues to yield.
That's awesome. I mean, I also even thought of like drug theories in Hollywood
I mean,
too.
Look at how she looks at the end. She's a very depressed. Well, they find a corpse who ends up being Watts' character, but this person looks like they've been, maybe died of an overdose, and almost looks like they've been chewed on by rats or something. It's really horrific. Yeah. So I think that's certainly a valid point.
It is.
And as very strange and deranged as a person as David Lynch is, he's never had an addiction.
Wow. Yeah. Well, I know. I think it's like it shows Hollywood in all its like very grandiose dualities, which is always really, really fun for me.
All right. Fantastic. Well, I think, folks, we are going to stop there. There's obviously a lot more to say about this movie. So write in and say it. Tell us your theories. Tell us what you like or don't like about this movie. We'd love to hear your voice. But I think we're going to move on now to recommendations.
Yes.
Megan, want to start us off?
Sure, Seth. So I had a very epiphany, if you will, while watching the movie. Very deep connection to me that I was like surprised by, that I want to like hear your thoughts on. I'm like struggling. I may have like mentioned this as a rec already. We'll see, but I think it's very, very connected. And for me, that rec's gonna be the Truman Show. Oh,
very cool.
And the parody aspect of, especially like acts 1 and 2 of Mulholland Drive, really reminded me a lot of Truman Show. I think also just the very weird script that Naomi is given, and us were a lot of like parallels going on there. And she's so like doe-eyed, like you said, and like we talked about, like happy-go-lucky, and it's so like thick, I guess, that parody aspect of it. I really liked it, and I'm like very intrigued by it when movies kind of do that, which I think both of these do, and both of these also like very much break that mold in their own ways. They're both, for anybody who's seen Truman Show, it's obviously like very tonally different. I think it leans more into, I guess, just more of a meta commentary, whereas Mulholland Drive feels very like in person, I guess, or like it's happening, but Truman Show's a little bit more like overhead things. I don't know. It's like kind of hard to explain.
That makes sense. I think I know what you mean.
To me.
I wouldn't have made that connection, but you're absolutely right. I mean, especially with the dialogue like you're talking about, because there is a very intentional thing, a very forced acting thing with all of the townsfolk. And I got to rewatch the Truman Show. I remember liking it, but I don't think I realized till much later, they're like, oh, that's not just a good movie, that's a great movie. Like that's an incredible.
I think I find movie. It like I found it when I watched it disturbing because of that parody aspect, and it was the first parody that felt like kind of like edging on that disturbing side. This was obviously Mulholland Drive, I would say, argue is way more disturbing than Truman Show, but at least they kind of like play off of each other in that regard.
Right. But I think it does also, like, well, you're right, the tone's sort of different. Like there is still like a heartbreaking thing at the core rather of Truman Show, and then it's funny, you know. And I think even someone who is expecting to go see Jim Carrey be wacky won't be too disappointed seeing that movie. I don't know, for my money, I think that's probably his best quote unquote serious role. I'll take that over Eternal Sunshine. But,
I think me too.
Yeah, I know that's one of the movies that everyone told me I would love. It's like, yeah, it's good. I don't know, it just didn't stick with me. It's not bad,
right?
It just I come back to Truman Show a lot more.
I think I watched it when I was like 14, so maybe that's not the time for me to watch Eternal Sunshine.
I haven't clicked with Charlie Kaufman, and you know that actually brings up a good point. Is like a lot of people do click with Charlie Kaufman. That's their guy. Lynch is certainly one of my guys. He's one of the people I very much jive with, and if it doesn't work for you folks, that's okay. You're not a bad film fan. You're not wrong. It's a very weird flavor.
We didn't like Drive.
Exactly.
So
make a t-shirt that says that. If we ever do merch, that's the film optimist. We don't like Drive.
Oh my.
But yeah, that it's a very, very weird vibe that there's a lot of I've connected with friends of trying to get spouses or significant others into Lynch, and that varying levels of success. I'm very grateful that Anne also grew up in a Lynch household, so is very into it. But bottom line is, you're not wrong if you don't like it. It's okay.
Exactly.
That being said, though, I am going to recommend another Lynch movie. Already talked about it. Blue Velvet is, like I said, really neck and neck for me. And I do think while these movies are very different, I think you want to watch both movies. Blue Velvet, I think, hits harder for me because and this is a pretty common experience a lot of people have had. Like I obviously didn't see it when it came out. It came out in '86, but I happened to see it when I was maybe 20 or something. And at the time you were probably not living at home or starting to live at home, and you start to realize the world is a lot stranger than your parents told you it was. It's not necessarily the things they told you about. Like there's drugs and there's other scary things, but the biggest deal is it's just much more bizarre, because this follows Kyle MacLachlan is returning home from college because his father's had a stroke, and when he's walking home from the hospital, he takes a shortcut through a field and he finds a severed ear, and he just gets caught up in trying to figure out what this is, you know, and then much like in Mulholland Drive, he's trying to solve this mystery on his own, but just becomes aware of this very bizarre seedy underbelly of his very small town in North Carolina that he never knew was there. And that hits home, I think, for a lot of people. If the world is, if nothing else, much, much stranger than we were prepared for. So
I like
that's what I love about it. Yeah.
Nice. Do they is one edging it out right now, Mulholland Drive versus Blue Velvet?
I just watched Mulholland Drive against it, maybe. I will also say Blue Velvet is definitely more of a trigger warning movie. It's a much more violent and sexually violent movie, and I fully understand that that's too much for some people. So
I see.
Yeah, be aware, but it's also great and terrifying.
Wow, you intrigued me.
Yes, I mean, if you watch it, we'll do an episode on that too. If we're going to do it, it's going to be our first two-parter for a director. I'd be very happy to do that. Great, Megan. This is always great to see you. Very happy to talk film with you, folks. If you haven't, go back and listen to some of our recent episodes. We've had some great guests on. We had my lovely wife Anne on to talk about Nope, the Jordan Peele movie. Riley was back recently. Listen to the Drive episode, hear us be wrong. And we have, I think, not one but two guests coming up on our next movie. I'm gonna spoil this. It's going to be a Shakespeare adaptation, so get ready for that.
Including former, to not tease them too much, but more English majors are coming to the podcast, which we're excited about.
Always have to talk with liberal arts major folk.
That's right. Well, Seth, thank you for another great movie.
Oh, thank you. Very happy to discuss it with you.
Awesome.
All right. Well, folks, take care.